A courageous 12-year-old black boy named Michael steps in to defend a white elderly couple, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, who are being harassed by a group of teenagers at the local grocery store. A simple act of bravery that he never expected would lead to such dramatic changes in his life. But the very next morning, a mysterious black SUV appears outside Michael's home, setting off a series of events that will transform his world in ways he could never have imagined. What was it about this seemingly straightforward act of kindness that turned Michael's life upside down? And how did his selfless action spark a chain of events that changed everything for him and his family? Stay tuned to find out. But before we dive into the story, comment below where you're watching from today. And if you enjoy this tale of unexpected twists and life-changing moments, don't forget to subscribe. The sun was just beginning to dip behind the rows of modest houses, casting a warm, golden hue over the neighborhood. The familiar sound of children laughing and playing echoed through the streets as they made the most of the fading daylight. Among them was Michael, a 12-year-old boy with skin the color of rich mahogany and eyes that shone with a wisdom beyond his years. He moved with a sense of purpose, even in his play, as if every action was guided by an invisible moral compass. Michael lived in a close-knit neighborhood, one where everyone knew everyone else. The community was racially diverse, with families of different backgrounds living side by side, sharing their lives and experiences. Despite their differences, there was a strong sense of unity among the residents. It was a place where people looked out for one another, where kindness was valued, and where a sense of justice was deeply ingrained in the hearts of those who called it home. Michael had been raised by his mother, Lena, a woman of quiet strength and unwavering determination. Lena worked long hours at a local hospital as a nurse, often pulling double shifts to make ends meet. Life hadn't always been easy for the two of them, but Lena had always made sure that Michael knew the importance of doing what was right, even when it was hard. She taught him to stand up for others, to be kind, and to never be afraid to speak out against injustice. Michael, always remember, Lena would often say as they sat together at their small kitchen table, "It doesn't matter how big or small you are, or where you come from. What matters is that you do what's right, no matter what." Those words had stuck with Michael, becoming a guiding principle in his young life. At school, he was known as the kid who wouldn't hesitate to defend a classmate being picked on, even if it meant getting into trouble himself. He was quick to offer a helping hand to anyone who needed it, whether it was a fellow student struggling with their homework or a neighbor needing assistance with their groceries. His strong sense of justice made him a beloved figure in the neighborhood, respected by both adults and kids alike. Among the many residents of the neighborhood, there was one couple who held a special place in Michael's heart, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson. The Thompsons were an elderly white couple who had lived in the neighborhood for as long as anyone could remember. They were the kind of people who always had a smile on their faces, regardless of the challenges life threw their way. Mr. Thompson, with his silver hair and gentle demeanor, was often seen sitting on the porch with a book in his hand, while Mrs. Thompson, her hair tied up in a neat bun, enjoyed tending to the small garden in front of their house. The Thompsons were well loved by the entire neighborhood, especially by the children. Every morning, they would walk to the park, a short distance from their home, to feed the birds. The sight of the elderly couple surrounded by a flock of pigeons and sparrows had become a cherished routine, a symbol of the quiet, enduring beauty of life. The Thompsons had no children of their own, but they treated the neighborhood kids as if they were their own grandchildren. They were always ready with a kind word, a piece of candy, or a warm hug. Michael had developed a close bond with the Thompsons over the years. It had started with small gestures, carrying their groceries, mowing their lawn, or helping Mr. Thompson with minor repairs around the house. Over time, those simple acts of kindness had blossomed into a deep, mutual respect and affection. The Thompsons saw in Michael the grandson they never had, and Michael, in turn, felt a sense of belonging and warmth whenever he was around them. "Michael, you're a good boy," Mrs. Thompson would often say, patting his cheek affectionately. "We're so lucky to have you in our lives." Michael would smile shyly, feeling a sense of pride in their words. He knew that the Thompsons meant a lot to him, but it was only later that he would realize just how much he meant to them as well. One sunny afternoon, as Michael walked home from school, he spotted Mr. Thompson struggling with a heavy bag of birdseed outside the grocery store. Without hesitation, Michael rushed over to help. "Here, Mr. Thompson, let me carry that for you," Michael offered, taking the bag from the older man's hands. "Oh, thank you, Michael," Mr. Thompson replied, his voice filled with gratitude. "I don't know what I'd do without you." As they walked together toward the Thompsons' home, Michael listened as Mr. Thompson talked about the birds they fed every day, how each one had its own personality, and how much joy they brought to him and Mrs. Thompson. "You know, Michael," Mr. Thompson said, his voice softening, "it's the little things in life that matter the most. A kind word, a small act of generosity, they can make all the difference in the world." Michael nodded, absorbing the wisdom in the older man's words. He knew that Mr. Thompson was right. It was those small, everyday acts of kindness that brought people together, that strengthened the bonds of community. As they reached the Thompsons' house, Mrs. Thompson came out to greet them. She smiled warmly at Michael, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Michael, dear, you're such a sweetheart," she said, taking the bag of birdseed from him. "Come inside, and I'll get you a little treat for being so helpful." Michael hesitated for a moment, but the promise of one of Mrs. Thompson's famous homemade cookies was too tempting to resist. He followed her inside, where the familiar scent of vanilla and cinnamon filled the air. The Thompsons' home was cozy and inviting, with soft, worn furniture and walls lined with photographs from their many years together. It was a place that felt like a second home to Michael, a refuge from the outside world. As he sat at the kitchen table, munching on a warm cookie, Michael listened to the Thompsons chat about their day. It was a simple, ordinary moment, but one that filled him with a deep sense of contentment. He knew that no matter what challenges life threw his way, he could always count on the Thompsons to be there for him, just as he would always be there for them. In that moment, Michael couldn't have known how soon he would be called upon to stand up for the Thompsons, to defend them in a way that would test the very principles his mother had taught him. But as he left their home that afternoon, he felt a renewed sense of purpose, a quiet determination to always do what was right, no matter the cost. Little did Michael know that his bond with the Thompsons, built on years of mutual respect and affection, would soon be put to the ultimate test, a test that would not only challenge his courage, but also reveal the true strength of the community that had raised him. It was a warm afternoon when Michael found himself walking home from school, his backpack slung over one shoulder. The sun was still high in the sky, casting long shadows on the ground, and the streets were quiet, with most of the neighborhood kids either at home or out playing in the park. Michael's mind wandered as he walked, thinking about the homework he had to finish and the weekend plans he was looking forward to. As he approached the local grocery store, a familiar sight caught his eye: Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, standing outside with a few grocery bags in hand. They looked as they always did, a picture of quiet dignity, with Mr. Thompson's silver hair gleaming in the sunlight and Mrs. Thompson clutching her purse tightly, her face set in a serene expression. Michael smiled to himself, planning to go over and offer his help, as he often did. But before he could take a step toward them, something happened that made him stop in his tracks. A group of teenagers, 5 or 6 of them, emerged from around the corner. They were loud, their voices carrying over the quiet street, and their laughter was sharp, tinged with something cruel. Michael recognized a few of them from school, older boys who had a reputation for causing trouble. At first, Michael thought they were just passing by, but then he noticed the way their eyes zeroed in on the Thompsons. The boys exchanged looks, smirks spreading across their faces as they began to slow down, circling around the elderly couple like a pack of wolves. "Hey, look at these two," one of the boys sneered, his voice dripping with mockery. "What are you doing out here, Grandpa? Shouldn't you be in a nursing home or something?" The other boys snickered, and Michael felt his stomach twist in anger. He could see the confusion on Mr. Thompson's face, the way Mrs. Thompson's hand tightened on her purse. They were good people, kind people, and they didn't deserve this. They didn't deserve to be treated like they were less than human. Another boy stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he looked at Mrs. Thompson. "What's in the bag, Granny? Some knitting supplies? Or maybe some dentures?" The group erupted into laughter again, louder this time, as if the joke was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. Michael's hands clenched in a fist at his sides, his heart pounding in his chest. He wanted to do something, to say something, but he hesitated. These boys were older, bigger, and there were more of them. For a brief moment, fear gripped him, whispering that it might be better to just walk away, to pretend he hadn't seen anything. But then he remembered his mother's words, the lessons she had drilled into him over the years. It doesn't matter how big or small you are, or where you come from. What matters is that you do what's right, no matter what. And this, Michael knew, was one of those moments. This was one of those times when he had to stand up for what was right, even if it scared him. With a deep breath, Michael stepped forward, his voice ringing out with more courage than he felt. "Hey, leave them alone." The laughter died down almost instantly as all eyes turned toward him. The teenagers looked at Michael with surprise, as if they couldn't believe someone like him would dare to speak up against them. For a moment, there was only silence, the kind that made the hairs on the back of Michael's neck stand on end. One of the boys, the tallest and most intimidating of the group, took a step forward. He was probably around 16 or 17, with a smug expression that told Michael he was used to getting his way. "And who are you?" the boy sneered, looking Michael up and down as if sizing him up. "The old folks' bodyguard." Michael's heart was racing, but he refused to back down. "Just leave them alone," he repeated, his voice steady. "They haven't done anything to you." The tall boy laughed, a short, harsh sound. "Look at this kid, trying to be a hero. You're going to regret getting in our way." The other boys started to laugh again, but Michael stood his ground, his eyes locked on the leader. "I'm not afraid of you," he said, though his heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. "What you're doing is wrong, and you know it." For a second, the tall boy looked taken aback, as if he hadn't expected Michael to talk back. But then his expression hardened, and he took another step closer. "You think you're tough, huh?" he said, his voice low and threatening. "You think you can tell us what to do?" Before Michael could respond, the boys shoved him hard, sending him stumbling back a few steps. The force of the push made Michael's backpack slip off his shoulder, but he caught himself before he could fall. The boys around him laughed, and the sound of their mocking voices rang in his ears. But Michael didn't back down. He straightened up, meeting the taller boy's gaze with unwavering determination. "I'm not trying to be tough," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I'm just doing what's right." There was a pause as the tall boy stared at him, as if trying to figure out what to do next. The other boys shifted uneasily, their earlier bravado starting to wane. They hadn't expected this, hadn't expected Michael to stand up to them so fearlessly. And in that moment, Michael could see the doubt flicker in their eyes, could see that they weren't as confident as they wanted to appear. Just as the tension reached its peak, the door of the grocery store swung open, and the store manager stepped outside. He was a stout man in his 40s with a no-nonsense expression that told everyone he wasn't in the mood for any nonsense. "What's going on out here?" he demanded, his eyes narrowing as he took in the scene. The boys immediately straightened up, their bravado evaporating under the manager's stern gaze. The tall boy glanced back at his friends, then at Michael, before finally stepping away from him. "Nothing. We were just leaving," he muttered, though his tone was still defiant. The store manager crossed his arms, clearly not buying it. "You'd better be," he said sharply. "And don't let me catch you harassing anyone around here again, or you'll have to answer to me." Without another word, the boys turned and walked away, their shoulders hunched and their heads down. As they disappeared around the corner, Michael let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. His hands were still shaking, but he felt a rush of relief wash over him. The store manager turned to Michael, his expression softening. "You okay, kid?" he asked, his voice more gentle now. Michael nodded. "Yeah, I'm fine," he said, though his voice was a little shaky. "Thanks for stepping in." The manager nodded in return. "You're a brave kid," he said, his tone filled with admiration. "Not many people would have stood up to those boys like you did." Michael felt a flush of pride at the manager's words, but he quickly shook it off. "I just didn't want them to hurt Mr. and Mrs. Thompson," he said simply. At the mention of the Thompsons, the manager turned to look at the elderly couple, who had been watching the whole scene unfold in stunned silence. Mrs. Thompson's eyes were wide with fear, and Mr. Thompson had an arm around her, as if trying to shield her from the world. "Are you folks okay?" the manager asked, his voice filled with concern. Mrs. Thompson nodded slowly, her hand clutching her purse even tighter. "Yes, we're fine," she said, though her voice was trembling. "Thanks to Michael." Mr. Thompson gave Michael a grateful look, his eyes filled with a mixture of relief and admiration. "We don't know what we would have done without you, Michael," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you." Michael shrugged, trying to downplay his actions. "It was nothing," he said, though he knew that wasn't true. "I just didn't want to see you get hurt." Mrs. Thompson stepped forward, her eyes brimming with tears. She reached out and took Michael's hand in hers, squeezing it tightly. "You're a good boy, Michael," she said, her voice quivering. "You have no idea how much it means to us that you stood up for us." Michael could see the genuine gratitude in her eyes, and it made his chest tighten with emotion. "It's okay, Mrs. Thompson," he said softly. "I'm just glad you're both okay." The store manager nodded approvingly, then glanced at the Thompsons' grocery bags. "How about I help you carry those to your car?" he offered. Mr. Thompson smiled gratefully. "Thank you," he said, "but we walked here today. We like to get some exercise when the weather's nice." The manager's eyes softened. "Well, in that case, let me help you carry them home," he said. "It's the least I can do after what happened." Michael quickly stepped in. "I can carry them," he said, eager to help. "It's on my way home anyway." The Thompsons exchanged a look, then nodded. "Thank you, Michael," Mr. Thompson said warmly. "We'd appreciate that." With a nod from the store manager, Michael picked up the grocery bags, surprised by how heavy they were. But he didn't mind. He was glad to be of help, and more importantly, he was glad that the Thompsons were safe. As they walked home together, the Thompsons stayed close to Michael, their steps a little slower than usual, as if they were still shaken by the encounter. Mrs. Thompson kept glancing at Michael, as if reassuring herself that he was really there, that he had really stood up for them. "You're a brave young man, Michael," Mr. Thompson said after a while, breaking the silence. "Not many people would have done what you did today." Michael felt a flush of embarrassment. "I just did what I thought was right," he said quietly. Mrs. Thompson smiled at him, her eyes filled with warmth. "And that's what makes you special," she said softly. "You have a good heart, Michael. Don't ever lose that." Michael didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and humility. He hadn't done what he did for praise or recognition. He had done it because it was the right thing to do, and that was enough for him. When they finally reached the Thompsons' house, Michael helped them carry the groceries inside, placing the bags on the kitchen counter. Mrs. Thompson insisted on giving him some cookies she had baked the day before, and Michael couldn't help but smile at her kindness. "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson," he said as he took the cookies, feeling a warm glow in his chest. "No, thank you, Michael," she replied, her voice filled with gratitude. "You've done more for us than you can ever know." Michael left their house feeling lighter than he had in a long time. As he walked home, he replayed the events of the day in his mind, still amazed at what had happened. He had stood up to a group of older boys, had defended the Thompsons, and had come out of it stronger. But more than that, he had learned something important, that doing the right thing wasn't always easy, but it was always worth it. And that was a lesson he would carry with him for the rest of his life. That night, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky deepened to a dusky purple, Michael sat at the kitchen table, his thoughts still swirling from the events of the day. The house was quiet, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the floorboards. His mother, Lena, was in the next room, finishing up some paperwork for her job, but Michael knew he needed to talk to her about what had happened. After taking a deep breath, he called out, "Mom, can I talk to you about something?" Lena appeared in the doorway a moment later, her expression immediately shifting to one of concern. She had always been perceptive, and she could tell from Michael's tone that something was bothering him. "Of course, sweetheart," she said, moving to sit across from him at the table. "What's on your mind?" Michael hesitated for a moment, trying to find the right words. He didn't want to worry her, but he also knew that he couldn't keep this to himself. "Something happened today," he began slowly, his eyes fixed on the wood grain of the table. "At the grocery store with Mr. and Mrs. Thompson." Lena's brow furrowed, and she leaned in slightly. "What do you mean? Are they okay?" "Yeah, they're okay," Michael said quickly, not wanting to alarm her. "But some older boys were harassing them. They were saying really mean things, and, well, I stepped in and told them to stop." Lena's eyes widened in surprise, and she reached out to take Michael's hand, squeezing it gently. "You stood up for them?" she asked, her voice a mix of pride and worry. Michael nodded, feeling a bit of the tension in his chest ease at her touch. "I couldn't just walk away, Mom. They were being so cruel, and the Thompsons didn't deserve that." Lena's grip on his hand tightened, and her eyes softened with a mixture of emotions. "Michael, I'm so proud of you," she said, her voice filled with sincerity. "It takes a lot of courage to stand up to bullies, especially when they're older and there's more of them." "But," she trailed off, her expression clouding with concern. Michael knew what she was going to say, and he braced himself for it. "But you're worried this might cause trouble," he finished for her, his voice quiet. Lena sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly as she looked at him. "Yes," she admitted. "I am worried. Those boys might try to get back at you for standing up to them. I just don't want you to get hurt, Michael." Michael looked down at their joined hands, feeling a pang of guilt for making her worry. "I know, Mom," he said softly. "I thought about that too, but I couldn't just stand by and watch them humiliate the Thompsons. It didn't feel right." Lena nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. "I know, sweetheart, and I'm not saying you did the wrong thing. Far from it. You did the right thing, and I'm so proud of you for that. I just want you to be careful." "I will be," Michael promised, meeting her gaze with determination. "I'll be careful, Mom." Lena studied his face for a long moment, then sighed again, this time with a touch of resignation. "You got a good heart, Michael," she said softly, "and I know you'll always do what you think is right. Just remember that sometimes doing the right thing can have consequences. And if anything ever happens, you need to tell me right away. We'll face it together, okay?" "Okay," Michael agreed, feeling a little better knowing that his mom was on his side. He knew she worried about him, especially since it was just the two of them, but he also knew that she trusted him to make the right decisions. They sat there for a while longer, holding hands in the quiet kitchen, before Lena finally gave his hand a final squeeze and stood up. "Now, how about I make us some hot cocoa?" she suggested, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. Michael smiled back, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. "That sounds great," he said, grateful for the comfort of something familiar and soothing. As Lena busied herself at the stove, Michael leaned back in his chair, letting the events of the day fade into the background. He knew he'd done the right thing, and that was enough for now. The next morning, Michael woke up feeling a little more at ease. The sun was shining brightly through his bedroom window, and the air was filled with the sounds of birds chirping outside. For a moment, everything felt normal, like any other day. But as Michael got dressed and made his way to the kitchen for breakfast, he couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in his chest. He tried to push it aside, reminding himself that everything had turned out okay the day before. The Thompsons were safe, and the boys hadn't come after him, at least not yet. As he sat down at the table, Lena placed a plate of pancakes in front of him, her usual warm smile on her face. "Morning, sweetheart," she said, ruffling his hair affectionately. "How did you sleep?" "Pretty good," Michael replied, though his voice was a little distracted. He picked up his fork and took a bite of the pancakes, savoring the familiar taste, but his mind was elsewhere. Lena must have noticed his preoccupation because she sat down across from him and tilted her head slightly. "What's on your mind, Michael?" she asked gently. Michael hesitated, not wanting to worry her more than he already had. "It's nothing, Mom," he said, trying to sound reassuring. "Just thinking about school." Lena didn't look entirely convinced, but she didn't press the issue. "Well, if anything's bothering you, you know you can talk to me, right?" "I know," Michael said with a nod, grateful for her understanding. He didn't want to burden her with his worries, especially when she had enough on her plate already. After breakfast, Michael grabbed his backpack and headed out the door, waving goodbye to his mother as he started his walk to school. The morning air was crisp and cool, and for a while, Michael was able to lose himself in the rhythm of his footsteps and the sounds of the neighborhood waking up. But as he turned the corner onto his street, something caught his eye that made him stop in his tracks. Parked across the street from his house was a black SUV, sleek and shiny, its windows tinted so dark that he couldn't see inside. The sight of it sent a shiver down his spine. The vehicle looked out of place in their modest neighborhood, where most people drove older cars or walked wherever they needed to go. Michael had never seen it before, and the fact that it was parked so close to his house made him uneasy. He tried to brush it off, telling himself it was probably just a visitor or someone lost. But as he walked past the SUV, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. His steps quickened, and he kept his head down, resisting the urge to look back over his shoulder. When he reached the end of the street, he finally glanced back, but the SUV hadn't moved. It just sat there, silent and still, like a shadow waiting in the background. Michael swallowed hard and forced himself to keep walking, pushing the unsettling image out of his mind. School was a welcome distraction, and Michael threw himself into his classes, focusing on his work and trying to forget about the SUV. He knew he was probably just overreacting, letting his imagination get the better of him. But deep down, a part of him couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. As the day wore on, Michael started to relax a little, convincing himself that the SUV was nothing to worry about. By the time the final bell rang, he had almost forgotten about it entirely. He packed up his things and headed out of the building, eager to get home and tell his mom about his day. But as he walked down the street toward his house, his heart sank when he saw the black SUV still parked in the same spot, just as it had been that morning. It hadn't moved an inch, and this time, Michael was sure he saw a figure sitting in the driver's seat, watching him. His steps faltered, and he felt a cold, knot of fear twist in his stomach. What was this car doing here? And why was it watching him? Michael forced himself to keep walking, trying to act like he hadn't noticed anything. But every instinct in his body was screaming at him to turn around and run, to get as far away from that SUV as possible. He had no idea who was in the car or what they wanted, but he knew one thing for sure: it wasn't good. As he rounded the corner onto his street, he saw his mother standing on the front porch, waiting for him. The sight of her familiar, comforting presence gave him the strength to keep going, even as the fear continued to gnaw at him. "Mom," he called out as he hurried up the walkway, his voice a little higher than usual. "There's a weird car parked down the street." Lena's eyes immediately sharpened with concern, and she stepped down from the porch, her gaze scanning the street. "What kind of car?" she asked, her voice tense. "A black SUV," Michael said, glancing over his shoulder. "It was there this morning, too, and I think someone's watching me." Lena's expression darkened, and she placed a protective hand on his shoulder. "Come inside, Michael," she said firmly. "We'll talk about this inside." Michael nodded, grateful for her support, and followed her into the house. As soon as they were inside, Lena locked the door behind them, her movements quick and precise. "Did you see the license plate?" she asked, turning to face him. "No," Michael admitted, feeling a little foolish for not thinking of it. "I was too scared to look." "That's okay," Lena said, her tone softening. "You did the right thing by telling me. We'll figure this out together." Michael nodded, but the fear still lingered, like a dark cloud hovering over him. "Do you think it's those boys from yesterday?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. Lena hesitated, her eyes filled with worry. "I don't know, Michael," she said honestly, "but we're not going to take any chances. I'll call the police and let them know what's going on." Michael's heart skipped a beat at the mention of the police. He didn't want to get anyone in trouble, but he also knew that this was serious. The thought of that SUV following him around made his skin crawl, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something bad was about to happen. "Okay," he said quietly, feeling a little better knowing that his mom was taking action. Lena gave him a reassuring smile and pulled out her phone, dialing the non-emergency number for the local police. As she spoke to the dispatcher, Michael sat down on the couch, trying to calm his racing thoughts. He wished he knew what was going on, but all he could do was wait and hope that everything would be okay. When Lena finished the call, she came over to sit beside him, wrapping her arm around his shoulders. "The police are going to send a patrol car to check out the area," she told him. "They'll keep an eye out for that SUV." Michael nodded, feeling a little bit of the tension in his chest ease. He knew it might take some time for the police to arrive, but at least they were doing something. Lena pulled him closer, and Michael rested his head on her shoulder, letting her warmth and steady presence calm his nerves. "We're going to be okay, Michael," she said softly, her voice filled with quiet determination. "I promise." Michael wanted to believe her, but the memory of the SUV's dark windows and the figure inside still lingered in his mind, making it hard to shake the feeling of unease. Later that evening, after the sun had set and the neighborhood had settled into its usual quiet, Michael and Lena sat together in the living room, the soft glow of the lamp casting a warm light over the room. The police had come by earlier, but the SUV had disappeared before they arrived, leaving no trace behind. They said they'll keep an eye on the neighborhood, Lena said, her voice calm but firm. And if we see that SUV again, we're supposed to call them right away. Michael nodded, trying to take comfort in her words. But a part of him couldn't help but wonder why the SUV had been there in the first place. Was it really just a coincidence, or was there something more to it? As they sat there in the quiet, Lena reached over and took his hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. No matter what happens, we're going to get through this, she said softly. You're not alone, Michael. I know, Mom, Michael replied, squeezing her hand back. Thank you. They stayed like that for a while, holding on to each other as the night grew darker outside. Michael knew that the SUV might return, that there might be more trouble ahead. But as long as he had his mom by his side, he knew he could face whatever came next. And as they sat together in the warm glow of the lamp, Michael made a silent promise to himself. He would protect his mom, just as she had always protected him. No matter what happened, he would stay strong, just like she had taught him. The night passed slowly, with Michael lying in bed, his mind racing with thoughts of the black SUV and what it could mean. Sleep was elusive, but eventually, exhaustion overtook him, and he drifted off into a restless slumber. The next day dawned bright and clear, with the sunlight streaming through the curtains and casting a golden glow over the room. Michael rubbed his eyes and sat up, the events of the previous day rushing back to him in a wave. He got dressed quickly and made his way to the kitchen, where Lena was already making breakfast. She greeted him with a warm smile, but there was a tension in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Good morning, she said, placing a plate of eggs and toast in front of him. How did you sleep? Okay, I guess, Michael replied, picking at his food. I kept thinking about that SUV. Lena sighed and sat down across from him, her expression serious. I did too, she admitted. But we can't let it control our lives, Michael. We have to keep going, keep living our lives. Michael nodded, knowing she was right. But the fear still lingered, like a shadow that refused to go away. He knew he couldn't let it take over, but it was hard to ignore. After breakfast, Lena walked him to the door, her hand resting on his shoulder. Remember, if you see that SUV again, go straight to a safe place and call me or the police, okay? Okay, Mom, Michael promised, feeling a little more reassured by her words. As he walked out the door and started down the street, he couldn't help but glance around, looking for any sign of the black SUV. But the street was empty, and the only sounds were the distant chatter of birds and the hum of traffic in the distance. Michael let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding and continued on his way, trying to push the fear out of his mind. He had to focus on school, on his friends, on living his life. He couldn't let one strange car take that away from him. But as he walked, he couldn't help but feel like something was watching him, just out of sight. And no matter how hard he tried to ignore it, the feeling wouldn't go away. The morning started like any other. The sun was shining, and birds chirped outside, filling the air with a sense of normalcy that Michael desperately needed. He had spent the night tossing and turning, his mind racing with thoughts of the black SUV. But as he got ready for school, he forced himself to focus on the day ahead, hoping that yesterday's encounter was just a one-time thing. Lena walked with him to the door, as she had done every day since the SUV first appeared. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder and smiled, though Michael could see the worry in her eyes. Remember what I said, Michael. If you see that SUV again, don't hesitate. Find a safe place and call me or the police. I will, Mom, Michael promised, trying to sound braver than he felt. He didn't want her to worry more than she already was. Lena pulled him into a quick hug before he left, her embrace warm and comforting. Have a good day at school, sweetheart. I'll be thinking of you. Thanks, Mom, Michael said, hugging her back. I'll be okay. He stepped outside and started down the street, his heart pounding a little faster than usual. His eyes scanned the neighborhood, looking for any sign of the black SUV, but everything seemed peaceful. The fear from the day before still lingered in the back of his mind, but he pushed it aside, determined to get through the day without letting it consume him. School passed in a blur of classes and conversations, but Michael found it hard to concentrate. He kept thinking about the SUV, wondering who was in it and why they were watching him. By the time the final bell rang, he was eager to get home, but a sense of unease still weighed on him. As he walked home, the streets were quiet, with only a few cars passing by. The closer he got to his house, the more anxious he became. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. And then he saw it. The black SUV was back, parked in the same spot as before, just down the street from his house. Michael's heart skipped a beat, and he froze, his breath catching in his throat. He knew he should turn around and find a safe place, just like his mom had told him, but his feet refused to move. He was rooted to the spot, staring at the vehicle as a cold knot of fear twisted in his stomach. The SUV's engine rumbled softly, and for a moment, Michael thought about running. But before he could make a decision, the SUV began to move. It pulled away from the curb and slowly drove toward him, the tires crunching on the pavement. Michael's pulse quickened, and he took a small step back, ready to bolt if he had to. But the SUV didn't speed up. Instead, it came to a gentle stop right in front of his house. The driver's door opened, and Michael's heart pounded in his chest as two men stepped out. They were both well-dressed, wearing dark suits that contrasted sharply with the casual surroundings of the neighborhood. The first man was tall, with a friendly smile and neatly combed hair. The second man was shorter, with glasses perched on his nose and a briefcase in hand. "Hello there," the taller man called out, his voice warm and reassuring. "You must be Michael." Michael hesitated, unsure whether to respond. His mother's warnings echoed in his mind, but something about the men's demeanor made him pause. They didn't seem threatening, and their smiles were genuine. "Yes, I'm Michael," he replied cautiously, keeping his distance. "Who are you?" The shorter man stepped forward, extending a hand. "My name is Mr. Roberts, and this is Mr. Johnson. We're representatives from a local community organization that assists elderly residents. We've been looking forward to meeting you." Michael eyed the outstretched hand before shaking it reluctantly. "Why were you looking for me?" Mr. Johnson's smile widened, and he reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a folded piece of paper. "We heard about what you did for the Thompsons," he said, his tone filled with admiration. "Standing up for them like that took a lot of courage. We wanted to thank you personally for your bravery." Michael blinked, taken aback by the man's words. He had expected trouble, not praise. "You did?" "Absolutely," Mr. Roberts chimed in, his eyes shining with genuine appreciation. "It's not every day that we see such a young person stand up for what's right, especially in the face of adversity. The Thompsons are beloved members of our community, and what you didn't go unnoticed." Michael felt a mixture of relief and confusion. He had been so focused on the fear that he hadn't considered the possibility that his actions might be seen in a positive light. "I just did what I thought was right," he mumbled, feeling a little embarrassed by the attention. "And that's exactly why we're here," Mr. Johnson said, unfolding the paper in his hand. "We want to present you with a letter of commendation from our organization. It's a small token of our appreciation for your bravery." He handed the letter to Michael, who accepted it with trembling hands. The paper was thick and embossed with the logo of the organization. The words "Letter of Commendation" printed in elegant script at the top. Michael scanned the letter quickly, his eyes widening as he read the words of praise written in his honor. "This is wow," Michael said, feeling a flush of pride rise in his cheeks. "Thank you. You've earned it," Mr. Roberts said, clapping him gently on the shoulder. "But that's not all. We'd also like to invite you and your mother to a special community event next week. You'll be honored in front of the entire community for what you did." Michael's eyes widened further. "Honored? At an event?" "Yes," Mr. Johnson confirmed, smiling warmly. "It's our way of showing how much we value acts of kindness and bravery in our community. We believe you deserve to be recognized for what you did." Michael felt a mixture of excitement and nerves. The idea of being honored in front of everyone was both thrilling and daunting. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Mr. Roberts said with a chuckle. "Just keep being the good person you are." As the men smiled at him, a thought crossed Michael's mind. and he hesitated before speaking. There's one thing I don't understand, he began, glancing between the two men. Why were you in that SUV? It kind of scared me. The men exchanged a quick glance, and Mr. Johnson cleared his throat. We apologize for that, Michael. It was never our intention to make you feel uncomfortable. We were simply waiting for the right moment to approach you. We wanted to make sure we caught you at home so we could speak with you directly. We understand how it might have looked, Mr. Roberts added, his expression sincere. But please know that our intentions were only good. We didn't mean to cause you any worry. Michael nodded slowly, feeling a bit more at ease. The explanation made sense, and the men seemed genuinely sorry for the misunderstanding. It's okay, he said, feeling a wave of relief wash over him. I just wasn't sure what to think, but I'm glad it was for something good. We're glad too, Mr. Johnson said, his smile returning. Now, before we go, there's one more thing we'd like to offer. Michael looked at them curiously as Mr. Roberts opened the briefcase he was carrying. From inside, he pulled out a neatly wrapped package and handed it to Michael. This is a small gift from our organization to you and your mother. It's nothing extravagant, but we hope it will be of help. Michael took the package, surprised by its weight. Thank you, but what is it? Open it when you're with your mother, Mr. Johnson suggested. We think it will be more meaningful that way. Michael nodded, his curiosity piqued. I will. With everything said, the two men stepped back, preparing to leave. We'll be in touch about the details of the event, Mr. Roberts said as they moved toward the SUV. We're looking forward to seeing you there, Michael. Thank you, Michael repeated, watching as the men got into the SUV. I'll be there. The SUV's engine roared to life, and the vehicle pulled away from the curb, leaving Michael standing in front of his house, still holding the letter and the package. He watched the SUV disappear down the street, his mind swirling with everything that had just happened. It all felt surreal, like a dream he might wake up from at any moment. Michael's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the front door opening. He turned to see his mother, Lena, standing in the doorway, her face filled with concern. Michael? What's going on? Who were those men? Michael walked over to her, holding up the letter. Mom, you're not going to believe this. Lena took the letter from him, her eyes scanning the words quickly. As she read, her expression shifted from worry to surprise, and then to pride. Michael, this is incredible. They're honoring you for what you did for the Thompsons? Yeah, Michael said, feeling a bit overwhelmed. And they gave us this too. He handed her the package, and Lena took it, her eyes widening as she felt its weight. What's inside? She asked, turning the package over in her hands. They said to open it together, Michael explained, his voice filled with anticipation. Let's see what it is. Lena led him inside, and they sat down at the kitchen table. With careful hands, she unwrapped the package, revealing a wooden box with a simple, elegant design. She lifted the lid, and both of them gasped at what they saw inside. The box contained a collection of grocery gift cards, each one labeled with a different store's name. There was also an envelope with cash and a note that read, "For any financial needs you might have. Thank you for raising such a remarkable young man." Tears welled up in Lena's eyes as she looked at the contents of the box. Michael, this is amazing. We can finally get ahead on our bills, and we won't have to worry about groceries for months. Michael was equally stunned, his heart swelling with gratitude. I didn't expect any of this, Mom. I just wanted to help the Thompsons. And that's why this happened, Lena said, pulling him into a tight hug. You did something brave and kind, and now people are recognizing that. I'm so proud of you, Michael. Michael hugged her back, feeling the weight of the moment sink in. All the fear and uncertainty he'd felt over the past few days melted away, replaced by a deep sense of fulfillment. He had done the right thing, and now, not only were the Thompsons safe, but he and his mother were being supported by their community. They spent the rest of the evening talking about the upcoming event, imagining what it would be like to be honored in front of everyone. Lena couldn't stop smiling, and neither could Michael. For the first time in a long while, they felt a sense of security and hope for the future. As the night grew late, Michael lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling. He couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened. The encounter at the grocery store, the fear of the SUV, and then the unexpected visit that had turned everything around. It was a whirlwind of emotions, but in the end it all led to something good. Michael smiled to himself, feeling a sense of peace. He knew that standing up for the Thompsons had been the right thing to do, but he never imagined it would lead to this. It was a lesson he would carry with him for the rest of his life. Doing the right thing wasn't always easy, but it was always worth it. As he drifted off to sleep, his thoughts were filled with dreams of the upcoming event and the possibilities that lay ahead. The fear was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence in who he was and the choices he had made. And as he closed his eyes, Michael knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning of something great. The days leading up to the community event passed in a blur of excitement and anticipation for Michael and Lena. The fear that had gripped them just a week ago seemed like a distant memory now, replaced by a sense of joy and purpose. Every morning, Michael woke up with a smile on his face, eager to face the day ahead. On the day of the event, Michael stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar of his best shirt. It was a crisp white button-down that Lena had bought him for special occasions, and today certainly qualified. He smoothed down his hair, trying to tame the unruly curls that seemed to have a mind of their own. "Michael," Lena's voice called from downstairs. "Are you ready? We don't want to be late." "Coming, Mom," Michael replied, taking one last look at his reflection. He took a deep breath, steadying his nerves. This was it. Today, he would be recognized in front of the entire community for what he had done. As he made his way downstairs, he found Lena waiting by the door. She was dressed in a simple but elegant blue dress, her hair neatly styled. When she saw Michael, her eyes lit up with pride. "Oh, Michael," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You look so handsome. I can't believe how grown-up you've become." Michael felt a flush of embarrassment at her words, but he couldn't help smiling. "Thanks, Mom. You look great, too." Lena reached out and straightened his collar, her touch gentle and reassuring. "Are you nervous?" she asked, studying his face. Michael nodded, not bothering to hide his anxiety. "A little," he admitted. "I've never been in front of so many people before." Lena smiled warmly, placing her hands on his shoulders. "You'll do great," she assured him. "Just remember, everyone there is proud of you. They're there to celebrate what you did, not to judge you." Her words helped ease some of the tension in Michael's chest, and he nodded gratefully. "Thanks, Mom. I'm ready." They left the house together, walking hand in hand down the street. The community center where the event was being held was only a few blocks away, and they had decided to walk rather than drive. As they made their way through the neighborhood, Michael noticed how different everything felt. The streets that had seemed so threatening just a week ago now felt warm and welcoming. As they approached the community center, they could see a crowd gathering outside. Colorful banners hung from the building, proclaiming Community Heroes Celebration in bold letters. The sight made Michael's heart skip a beat, a mixture of excitement and nervousness coursing through him. Mr. Johnson and Mr. Roberts were waiting at the entrance, greeting people as they arrived. When they spotted Michael and Lena, their faces lit up with warm smiles. "Michael, Mrs. Thompson," Mr. Johnson called out, waving them over. "We're so glad you could make it." "How are you feeling, Michael?" "A little nervous," Michael admitted, his voice slightly shaky. "But excited too." Mr. Roberts chuckled, clapping him gently on the shoulder. "That's perfectly normal," he said reassuringly. "But don't worry. Everyone here is rooting for you." They led Michael and Lena into the building, where the main hall had been transformed into a grand celebration space. Tables were set up around the edges of the room, laden with food and drinks. At the far end, a stage had been erected, complete with a podium and a large screen behind it. As they entered, a hush fell over the crowd, and then a wave of applause erupted. Michael felt his cheeks grow warm as he realized all eyes were on him. Lena squeezed his hand, offering silent support as they made their way through the room. Familiar faces beamed at them from all sides. There were Michael's teachers, looking proud and pleased. His classmates waved excitedly, some giving him thumbs up. Even the local shopkeepers he saw every day were there, nodding approvingly as he passed. But the sight that truly warmed Michael's heart was Mr. and Mrs. Thompson. The elderly couple stood near the front of the room, their faces wreathed in smiles. When they saw Michael, Mrs. Thompson's eyes filled with tears, and Mr. Thompson's chest swelled with pride. Michael and Lena made their way over to them, and Mrs. Thompson immediately pulled Michael into a tight hug. "Oh, Michael," she said, her voice quivering with emotion. "We can't thank you enough for what you did." Mr. Thompson placed a hand on Michael's shoulder, his grip firm and warm. "You're a fine young man, Michael," he said, his voice gruff with feeling. "What you did, it means more to us than you could ever know." Michael felt a lump form in his throat, overwhelmed by their gratitude. "I just did what anyone would have done," he said softly. Mr. Thompson shook his head, a wry smile on his face. "No, son, not everyone would have done what you did. It takes real courage to stand up for what's right, especially when you're outnumbered." Before Michael could respond, Mr. Johnson's voice rang out over the PA system. "Ladies and gentlemen, if you could all take your seats, we're about to begin the ceremony." Michael felt a flutter of nerves in his stomach as he realized it was time. Lena gave his hand one last squeeze before they were led to their seats at the front of the room. As they sat down, Michael couldn't help but marvel at how many people had turned out for the event. The room was packed, with every seat filled and people standing along the walls. Mr. Johnson took the stage, tapping the microphone to ensure it was working. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice warm and welcoming. "Thank you all for coming out tonight to celebrate the best of our community. We're here to honor acts of kindness, bravery, and compassion that make our neighborhood a better place to live." He went on to talk about the importance of community spirit, of looking out for one another, and standing up for what's right. As he spoke, Michael found himself nodding along, feeling a sense of pride in being part of such a caring community. "And now," Mr. Johnson said, his voice taking on a more serious tone, "I'd like to introduce you to someone truly special. A young man who, when faced with a difficult situation, chose to do what was right rather than what was easy. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to the stage Michael Thompson." The room erupted into applause as Michael stood up, his legs feeling slightly wobbly. Lena gave him an encouraging nod, and he made his way to the stage, each step feeling both terrifying and exhilarating. As he reached the podium, Mr. Johnson shook his hand warmly before stepping aside. Michael looked out at the sea of faces before him, all smiling encouragingly. He took a deep breath, steadying himself before he began to speak. "Good evening, everyone," he started, his voice shaky at first but growing stronger as he continued. I'm not really sure what to say. I didn't do what I did for recognition or praise. I did it because it was the right thing to do." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson have been like grandparents to me for as long as I can remember. They've always been there with a kind word or a warm smile. When I saw those boys harassing them, I knew I couldn't just stand by and watch." Michael's voice grew more confident as he spoke, fueled by the memory of that day. "I was scared," he admitted. "Those boys were older and bigger than me. But I remembered something my mom always told me. It doesn't matter how big or small you are, or where you come from. What matters is that you do what's right, no matter what." He looked over at Lena, who was beaming at him with tears in her eyes. "So that's what I did. I stood up to those boys, not because I thought I could win a fight, but because I knew it was the right thing to do. And you know what? They backed down. Not because I was stronger or tougher, but because deep down, they knew what they were doing was wrong." Michael took another deep breath before continuing. "I didn't expect any of this," he said, gesturing to the room around him. "I didn't do it for a reward or for recognition. But standing here now, seeing all of you, I realized something important. What happened that day wasn't just about me standing up to some bullies. It was about our community coming together to say that we won't tolerate cruelty or injustice." He looked out at the crowd, making eye contact with as many people as he could. "Every one of you here tonight, you're all heroes too. Because by being here, by supporting this event, you're showing that you care. You're showing that in our community, kindness matters. Compassion matters. Doing the right thing matters." Michael's voice grew stronger, filled with passion and conviction. "So, I want to challenge all of you. The next time you see someone in need, don't look away. Don't pretend it's not your problem. Stand up. Speak out. Do what's right. Because that's what being a community is all about. It's about looking out for each other, protecting each other and making sure that everyone feels safe and valued. He paused, feeling the weight of his words settle over the room. "Thank you all for this honor," he said softly. "But the real honor is being part of a community that cares so much. Thank you." As Michael finished speaking, there was a moment of stunned silence. Then, as if a dam had broken, the room erupted into thunderous applause. People rose to their feet, clapping and cheering. Michael felt overwhelmed by the response, his heart pounding in his chest. Mr. Johnson returned to the stage, shaking Michael's hand vigorously. "Thank you, Michael," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't think any of us could have said it better." As Michael made his way back to his seat, he was stopped by countless people wanting to shake his hand or pat him on the back. By the time he reached Lena, he felt dazed, as if he were in a dream. Lena pulled him into a tight hug, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered fiercely. So proud." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and well wishes. People Michael had never met before came up to him, telling him how moved they were by his words and his actions. Teachers praised his maturity and bravery. Even some of his classmates, who had never paid him much attention before, approached him with newfound respect in their eyes. As the night wore on, Michael found himself back with Mr. and Mrs. Thompson. The elderly couple had been quiet throughout the ceremony, but now Mrs. Thompson took Michael's hands in hers, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Michael," she said softly, "what you did for us, it means more than you could ever know. But hearing you speak tonight, seeing how you've inspired so many people, that's a gift beyond measure." Mr. Thompson nodded in agreement, his usually gruff demeanor softened by emotion. "You've done more than just help two old folks," he said. "You've reminded this whole community what it means to be good neighbors, to be decent human beings. That's something special, son." Michael felt a lump form in his throat, overwhelmed by their words. "I just did what you taught me," he said quietly. "You've always been so kind to me, to everyone. I just wanted to repay some of that kindness." Mrs. Thompson smiled, reaching up to cup Michael's cheek in her hand. "And you have, dear. You've repaid it 1,000 times over." As the evening drew to a close, Michael found himself standing outside the community center with Lena, watching as people slowly filtered out into the night. The air was cool and crisp, filled with the sounds of laughter and conversation as people lingered, reluctant to let the magical evening end. Mr. Johnson and Mr. Roberts approached them, both men looking tired but happy. "Michael," Mr. Johnson said warmly, "I want to thank you again for everything. Your speech tonight, well, I don't think there was a dry eye in the house." Mr. Roberts nodded in agreement. "You've started something special here, Michael. People are already talking about ways to keep this spirit of community going. Neighborhood watch programs, volunteer initiatives. You've inspired a lot of good." Michael felt a flush of pride at their words, but also a sense of responsibility. "I want to help," he said earnestly. "Whatever I can do to keep this going, I'm in." The men exchanged pleased looks. "We were hoping you'd say that," Mr. Johnson said. "We'd like you to be part of our youth outreach program, talking to other kids about standing up for what's right, being active in the community. What do you think?" Michael's eyes widened in surprise and excitement. "Really? I'd love that." Lena placed a hand on Michael's shoulder, her face beaming with pride. "I think that's a wonderful idea," she said. "Michael has always had a way with words, and I know he'd be passionate about it." As they discussed the details of the program, Michael felt a sense of purpose settling over him. He realized that what had started as a single act of bravery had grown into something much bigger. He wasn't just Michael anymore, the kid who stood up to some bullies. He was becoming a leader, someone who could make a real difference in his community. The walk home that night was filled with excited chatter as Michael and Lena discussed the events of the evening and the opportunities that lay ahead. The streets that had once seemed threatening now felt like an extension of home, filled with the warmth and support of their community. As they reached their front door, Lena paused, turning to face Michael. In the soft glow of the porch light, he could see the pride and love shining in her eyes. "Michael," she said softly, "I want you to know something. I've always been proud of you, every single day. But tonight, Tonight you showed everyone else what I've always known. You're not just my son. You're a beacon of hope, a force for good in this world." Michael felt his eyes well up with tears, overwhelmed by her words. "I couldn't have done any of it without you, Mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Everything I am, everything I do, it's because of you." Lena pulled him into a tight hug, and for a long moment, they stood there on the porch, holding each other close. When they finally pulled apart, both of their faces were wet with tears, but they were smiling. As they entered the house, Michael felt a profound sense of change. The world outside seemed bigger now, full of possibilities he had never considered before. But at the same time, his connection to his home, his mother, and his community felt stronger than ever. That night, as Michael lay in bed, his mind replayed the events of the evening. He thought about the faces in the crowd, the words of encouragement, the promises of future projects. But most of all, he thought about the lesson he had learned, the lesson he hoped to share with others. That one person, no matter how young or small, could make a difference. That standing up for what's right, even when it's scary, was always worth it. As he drifted off to sleep, Michael felt a sense of peace and purpose wash over him. He knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to make a difference. But he was ready for them, because now he knew, without a doubt, that he was part of something bigger than himself. He was part of a community that cared, a community that stood together against injustice and cruelty. And as long as he held on to that knowledge, as long as he remembered the lessons he had learned and the support he had received, Michael knew he could face anything that came his way. He was no longer just a boy who had done a brave thing. He was a symbol of hope, a reminder of the power of kindness and courage. With that thought warming his heart, Michael closed his eyes and fell into a deep, peaceful sleep, ready to face whatever adventures tomorrow might bring. The weeks following the community celebration were a whirlwind of activity for Michael. True to their word, Mr. Johnson and Mr. Roberts had quickly integrated him into their youth outreach program. Every Tuesday and Thursday after school, Michael found himself at the community center, speaking to groups of kids about the importance of standing up for what's right and being active members of their community. At first, Michael had been nervous about speaking in front of groups, but he soon discovered that he had a natural talent for connecting with other kids. He shared his story openly, not just the triumphant parts, but the scary moments too. He talked about how afraid he had been when he first confronted the bullies, and how that fear had almost stopped him from acting. "But you know what?" he would say, looking out at the sea of young faces. "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing even when you are scared." The impact of his words was immediate and profound. Kids who had been silent and withdrawn at the beginning of his talks would approach him afterward, eyes shining with newfound determination. They shared their own stories of times they had seen injustice, but been too afraid to act. Michael listened to each one, offering encouragement and advice. One day, after a particularly emotional session where a young girl had tearfully confessed to witnessing bullying but being too scared to intervene, Michael had an idea. He approached Mr. Johnson with a proposal for a peer support group, where kids could come together to discuss their experiences and brainstorm ways to make their school and neighborhood safer and more inclusive. Mr. Johnson was thrilled with the idea. "Michael," he said, clapping him on the shoulder, "you continue to amaze me. Let's make it happen." Within weeks, the Young Champions group was up and running. Michael led the meetings, but he made sure everyone had a chance to speak and contribute. They discussed everything from bullying prevention to community service projects. The group quickly became popular, with new members joining every week. At home, Lena watched her son's transformation with a mixture of pride and amazement. The shy, sometimes hesitant boy was blossoming into a confident young leader. She often found herself blinking back tears as she watched him pore over plans for the next Young Champions meeting or practice his speeches in front of the mirror. "You know," she said one evening as they sat at the kitchen table, Michael's notebook spread out before him, "your father would be so proud of you." Michael looked up surprised. Lena rarely spoke about his father, who had passed away when Michael was just a baby. "Really?" he asked, his voice soft. Lena nodded, reaching out to squeeze his hand. "He always believed in standing up for what's right, just like you." He would have loved seeing you like this, making such a difference in people's lives." Michael felt a warmth spread through his chest at her words. He had always wondered about his father, and knowing that he would have approved of Michael's actions meant more than he could express. As the weeks turned into months, Michael's influence continued to grow. The Young Champions group expanded to other schools in the district. Michael was invited to speak at assemblies and community events. He even had a meeting with the mayor, who wanted to hear his ideas on youth engagement in local governance. But despite all the attention and accolades, Michael never forgot where it all started. He made sure to visit Mr. and Mrs. Thompson regularly, helping them with chores and simply spending time with them. The elderly couple had become like grandparents to him, and their pride in his accomplishments meant the world to him. One crisp autumn afternoon, as Michael was raking leaves in the Thompsons' yard, Mr. Thompson came out to join him. The old man moved slowly, leaning heavily on his cane, but his eyes were bright as he watched Michael work. "You know, son," he said, his voice gruff with emotion, "what you did that day, it didn't just help us. It changed this whole community." Michael paused in his raking, looking up at Mr. Thompson. "I just did what anyone would have done," he said, echoing the words he'd spoken so many times before. Mr. Thompson shook his head, a wry smile on his face. "No, Michael, not everyone would have done what you did. It takes a special kind of courage to stand up when everyone else is looking away." He gestured towards the street, where neighbors were out walking their dogs or chatting on porches. "Look around you. People are friendlier now. They look out for each other more. And it all started with you." Michael felt a lump form in his throat as he took in Mr. Thompson's words. He had been so focused on moving forward, on doing more, that he hadn't really stopped to consider the full impact of his actions. "I couldn't have done any of it without you and Mrs. Thompson," he said softly. "You've always been so kind to me, to everyone. I just wanted to repay some of that kindness." Mr. Thompson's eyes misted over. "Well, you've done that and more, son. You've given an old man hope for the future." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the yard, Michael finished up the raking. Mrs. Thompson came out with a tray of lemonade and cookies, insisting that Michael take a break before heading home. Sitting on the porch with the Thompsons, sipping lemonade and watching the neighborhood settle into the quiet of evening, Michael felt a profound sense of peace. He thought about how far he'd come since that day at the grocery store, how much his life had changed. But more than that, he thought about how much work there was still to do. There were still injustices to fight, still people who needed help and protection. The Young Champions group was growing, but there were always new challenges to face. As he said goodbye to the Thompsons and started his walk home, Michael's mind was already racing with new ideas. Maybe they could organize a community cleanup day or start a tutoring program for younger kids. The possibilities seemed endless. Lena was waiting for him when he got home, a proud smile on her face as she listened to him excitedly share his new plans. As they sat down at dinner, Michael couldn't help but feel grateful for everything that had happened. What had started as a simple act of kindness had grown into something much bigger than himself. He had found his voice, his purpose, and he knew, with absolute certainty, that this was just the beginning. As he went to bed that night, Michael thought about all the lives he had touched and all the lives that had touched his in return. He thought about the Thompsons, about Mr. Johnson, and the kids in the Young Champions group. He thought about his mother, and the father he had never known, but whose spirit of justice lived on through him. And as he drifted off to sleep, Michael made a silent promise to himself. He would keep fighting, keep standing up for what was right. Because now he knew, beyond any doubt, that one person really could make a difference. And he was determined to make that difference every single day. What would you have done if you were in Michael's shoes, facing a life-changing offer after standing up for someone in need? Would you have embraced the unexpected recognition and support, or would you have hesitated? If you found this story of bravery, unexpected twists, and the power of doing good inspiring, please consider subscribing to my channel. I pour my heart into crafting these impactful narratives, and your support means the world to me. Thank you for being a part of this journey and for making these stories possible.